If I showed you the top 5 qualified relievers in baseball based on fielder independent pitching, there's a name I'm pretty confident most people don't know sitting at the top. He's right next to pitching ninja legend Mason Miller and sweeper god Orion Kerkering. He also shows up third in Fangraphs WAR among relievers, and one of the most basic yet effective stats for pitching analysis, strikeout minus walk rate, he's fourth alongside a bunch of names that look very familiar. He plays on a team atop their division with one of the best records in Major League Baseball. He's not even the highest leverage reliever on his own team, and he was a non-drafted free agent in 2020's COVID draft out of the University of Hawaii. The man I'm talking about is the Guardians' right-handed reliever, Cade Smith. He's having an unbelievable year, not enough people are paying attention, and he's proving once again that the Guardians are elite at pitching development. Smith is a pretty simple pitcher. He throws 3 pitches, a fastball that sits 96, a sweeper, and a splitter. Some might call this the modern pitching holy trinity. The fastballs are in zone and up, the secondaries are down. One of the more interesting things about him from a usage perspective is that he throws his fastball 70% of the time and doesn't really increase or decrease the usage based on count. Versus righties, he throws both his sweeper and his splitter more than 10%, with a harder lean on the sweeper early in counts and the splitter late in counts. Versus lefties, he's a bit simpler. It's basically all 4-seam and split. He'll use the split more as he gets ahead, and the only sweepers you're going to see are early. His shapes are great, and he throws everything hard. Fangraphs Stuff Plus has him with 3 above average to plus pitches. The fastball has average vertical break from an average release height with good velocity. The splitter is 89 miles per hour, which is a few ticks harder than the average splitter, and separates by 14 inches in terms of vertical break off his fastball. Anything above 10 inches of separation is really going to help stuff models like the pitch. And the sweeper is a notch better than the average sweeper because of the sweep velocity combination. Everything seems pretty standard here for the most part, but there are 2 things that take him to the next level. The first is that he has good command. In a very broad sense, relievers are relievers because they probably couldn't command the ball as a starting pitcher. Smith zones his fastball right around 65% of the time, which is the highest rate in baseball among starting pitchers with 250 or more 4-seam fastballs thrown. Zone rate isn't a perfect proxy for location or command, but it's pretty striking that Smith can be in the zone this much. On one hand, you have to wonder whether they should stretch him out into a starting pitcher and see if some of these traits stick. But on the other hand, he's using count leverage to his advantage in high leverage spots with an arsenal that grades out really well. Put good pitches in the zone as much as possible. Cade Smith is doing that. But I do think this approach wouldn't be as effective for him if he didn't have one other thing, his extension down the mound. This is simply how far out in front of the rubber he's releasing the ball. The average in MLB is just below 6.5 feet. In a sample of about 600 pitchers this season, the biggest extension we have is Logan Gilbert and Alexis Diaz at 7.7 feet. Cade Smith has 7.4 feet of extension, which is just outside the 99th percentile. Just 1% of Major League pitchers this season are releasing the ball closer to the plate than he is. This is good. I consider extension one of the few variables that's measuring something the body is doing on the public side. We know very little objectively about how the body moves in space, but what we can track game to game and year to year are extension and release height, and throw up red, green, or beige flags when something changes. Extension and release point are both unfortunately related to things that happen further down the kinetic chain, right before ball release. So they're often a byproduct of something happening earlier in the chain. Extension and release are not perfect, but we kind of have to work with what we're given. One of the reasons I think pitching analysts like extension so much is that apart from giving the hitter less reaction time, is that it's also connected to lower release heights. If you extend further down the mound, release the ball further towards the plate, and don't tilt your trunk up, what you're doing is lowering your release height, even if your literal arm angle or how you're throwing the ball isn't changing at all. So the modern state of baseball loves above average vertical break numbers for a given release height, especially a below average release height, those upshoot fastballs that have really flat approaches into the zone. If you're a guy like Cade Smith, who's 6'5", the only way for him to get down to an average release is to either extend a ton or have a lower arm angle, both of which he's doing. So his release height isn't really descriptive of what hitters are seeing. Release height is saying, this is an average release. But extension is saying there's no way that's an average release. He's getting huge extension. You have to consider how his body is getting to that release point by looking at things like extension and pitcher height. We see similar situations in guys like Paul Skeens and Yuri Perez. Both are really tall dudes with literally average release heights that are surely not average in any way. To sum this all up, Cade Smith's fastball is unique. It's a byproduct of how hard he throws in the shape, but also how that all connects back to his body. And this allows it to be a pitch that he can throw 65% of the time in the zone and still chew up hitters. Smith is a great pitcher, and I see no reason for his success to stall. Even if he runs into some regression, he's still going to be a good leverage reliever. But this also has to be frustrating for the league to continue looking up and seeing the Guardians churn out amazing pitchers. They're considered one of the best organizations in baseball at developing velocity, and Smith is an example of that. In his final 2 seasons at Hawaii, he averaged 88.2 miles per hour, and the next year he averaged 91.6. So we saw some uptick in velocity before he entered pro ball. When he got to the Guardians organization, that velo uptick continued. In 2021, he was 91.9 miles per hour on his fastball. 2022 at AA, he was 92.6. AA 2023, he was 93.9. In AAA 2023, he was 94.8. Flash forward to this season, and he's 95.8. One of the funniest things about velocity is that the relationship between adding velocity and a fastball success isn't linear. Looking at this season from an expected contact quality standpoint, every tick you add above 95 miles per hour, the more valuable subsequent ticks of velocity become. You're incentivized as a pitcher to climb higher if you're in that 93 to 95 window, where Smith is just above. Perhaps there's some sampling bias here given that the distribution of relievers increases as you climb higher in velocity buckets. But I think the general premise here is that velocity usually means better and more velocity is usually good. The most insane thing in all of this is that the Guardians have a Cade Smith lookalike knocking on the door at AAA in Andrew Walters. He was the 62nd pick in the competitive balance round last season out of the University of Miami. He was obliterating AA. He got promoted, ran into some issues likely connected to using in Major League Baseball for the first time, which they do at AAA, or the weird automated zone that's now just a challenge system, and now he's shoved through his last 6 or 7 outings. His fastball characteristics are pretty similar to Cade Smith's. Walters sits 96 miles per hour, 17.3 inches of vertical break from a 5.9 foot release with 6.7 feet of extension. That's better than average velocity, with above average vertical break for that release and above average extension. And he's 6'4", so not as tall as Cade, potentially less funk in his delivery in that respect. And he doesn't pitch in zone as much as Cade does yet. Cade made a 10 percentage point leap in zone rate from 2023 to 2024. If Walters does that into next season, he'll have a plus fastball that's in zone at a league average rate. The Guardians do a couple things that jump out to me when you look at their aggregated minor league data. So the 4 levels from Class A through AAA. They have the second highest K- walk rate. They use the most four-seam fastballs, which is distinct in an era where the league continues to fade fastball usage. They're actually bottom 5 in four-seam fastball velocity. I think this is just because they develop it rather than draft it. They have the 3rd highest four-seam vertical break, which is partially connected to the low velocity, more time for the ball to carry. So maybe that's more of a feature than a bug. And their performance on those fastballs is top 10 in the minor leagues. And did you see their most recent draft class? They took 8 pitchers in the first 10 rounds. Doty has a banger curveball. Joey Oki is a huge extension guy with a low release and a ride fastball. Aiden Major averaged 19 inches of vertical break from a 5.7 foot release with a college baseball. So even if that comes down and changes a bit, he'll probably still land above average. And I think he needs a fastball location adjustment. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm making a video on one of these guys within the next few years. The natural progression of this video is to ask how the Guardians are so good at developing velocity and how are they so highly touted on the pitching development side of things generally. I'm going to break it down into 3 buckets that I've kind of sourced with some people in other organizations and also a couple of individuals in the Guardians organization. Number 1, I think they were on the velocity trend pretty early. What I believe that allows them to do is to learn from potential mistakes that they made, build up a database of information, build up understanding among their coaches solidify an infrastructure through that experience that they now can iterate on and continue to improve. The reality is that just takes time. So the earlier you are on a trend, the better you will likely be as you continue to innovate off that trend. Another bucket you could throw out here is that they understand the throw really well. This happens, I think, in most organizations that are really good at developing velocity, like the Dodgers, the Brewers, etc. The Twins, I think, are really good at this. They understand how to send energy through the chain and how to make developments. They use the biomechanic information they have available, Kinetrax, markered motion capture, markerless motion capture, whatever else they might have in their organization. They use that well to train pitchers. They understand the value of velocity. Sending more energy through the chain is more efficient mechanics. I think we often get caught up and think efficient mechanics are those that are clean and don't result in injury, when in reality, efficiency just means more force output, more velocity through the ball. And the last idea I'll throw out here is that I think they're really integrated through all levels of their development. This is a general idea that I think organizations always bring up, but the reality is that most organizations, I don't believe, do this well. I think a lot of organizations have disconnects between major league staff, minor league staff, and even different levels of minor league staff. I think the Guardians are one of the few teams probably in baseball that are beautifully integrated top through bottom. Everyone understands the mission and the idea and what they're trying to do as an organization, which you've seen over the last couple of years, which is to develop velocity and to prize velocity, to prize four seam shape, fastball throwing, strike throwing, count leverage, etc. That is pushed all the way down and all the way up so that the coaching guys get is consistent through different levels of the minor leagues. So those are kind of my three buckets. That's my theory as to how they've gotten so good at doing this. I understand it's really simple, but I think in execution, as we've seen with some teams that are not good at doing this, it is much harder than just taking those three things, putting them on a whiteboard and telling coaches that this is what we want to do as an organization. So kudos to the Guardians. Kudos to Cade Smith. I needed to give him some love because I keep seeing him at the top of leaderboards, and I had to dig into how he got so good. And it just unraveled into this idea as to how the Guardians got so good. I think he's very emblematic of that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, subscribe. There's a Substack you could subscribe to that I always have thoughts in. We'll drop it all in the video details. Thanks for watching.